The gavel didn't just sound like wood hitting wood. It sounded like the lid of a coffin slamming shut. You think you know power? You think a $3,000 custom Italian suit and a Harvard law degree give you the right to crush anyone standing in your way? Quentin Vale certainly thought so. He was the shark of Cook County, a defense attorney who chewed up the innocent and spat them out before his morning espresso. But on a rainy Tuesday in November, Quentin made the fatal mistake of screaming at a quiet 16-year-old girl sitting on a courthouse bench. He assumed she was a delinquent. He assumed she was nobody. He didn't know that the woman walking through the metal detectors behind him wasn't just a mother coming to pick up her child. She was a U.S. Marshal with a federal warrant in her pocket, and she was about to turn his entire life into a nightmare. This is the story of how arrogance met the ultimate karma. The air inside the Richard J. Daley Center in Chicago always smelled the same, a mix of floor wax, damp wool coats, and anxiety. Rain lashed against the massive glass windows of the courthouse, blurring the gray skyline outside. Quentin Vale checked his reflection in the glass of the elevator doors. He smoothed the lapel of his charcoal pinstripe suit, a bespoke piece from Savile Row that cost more than most of the people in this building made in 3 months. At 42, Quentin was the managing partner of Vale, Holt, and Associates. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with slicked-back blonde hair and eyes that constantly scanned the room for weaknesses. Today was a big day. He was defending Grayson Thorne, the son of a pharmaceutical tycoon who had been caught drag racing his Porsche down Michigan Avenue while intoxicated. It should have been a slam-dunk DUI conviction for the prosecution. But Quentin didn't do convictions. He did acquittals, loopholes, and destroyed reputations. "Where is the coffee?" Quentin snapped, turning to his frantic paralegal, a young man named Nolan Whitaker, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The line at the Starbucks downstairs was out the door. "Mr. Vale, I didn't want to make us late for the pre-trial motion," Nolan stammered, clutching a stack of files. "I don't pay you to think about time, Nolan. I pay you to keep me caffeinated and prepared. If I walk into Judge Crow's courtroom with a caffeine headache, heads will roll, and yours will be the first into the basket." Quentin spun around, his leather briefcase swinging heavily, and marched toward the seating area outside courtroom 402. He needed to sit, review the suppression motion one last time, and center himself before he went in to dismantle the credibility of the arresting officer. But his favorite bench, the one right near the radiator, away from the drafty doors, was occupied. Sitting there was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 16. She was black, wearing a slightly oversized gray hoodie, faded jeans, and pristine white sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in long, neat braids, and she had a thick chemistry textbook balanced on her knees. She was scribbling notes into a spiral notebook, completely absorbed in her work, a pair of large headphones over her ears. To Quentin, she was an eyesore. She was an obstruction. He stopped right in front of her, tapping the toe of his expensive Oxford shoe on the linoleum floor. She didn't look up. She was humming softly, tapping her pen against her chin. Quentin's patience, already thin from the lack of coffee, snapped. "Excuse me," he said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. The girl didn't react. Quentin stepped closer, invading her personal space, and waved his hand in front of her face. "Hey, you, headphone girl." Lila Washington blinked, startled. She pulled her headphones down around her neck and looked up. Her eyes were wide, confused, but not fearful. "I'm sorry. Were you talking to me?" "Yes, I was talking to you," Quentin sneered, looking down his nose at her. "You're in my spot." Lila looked around the hallway. It was crowded. "Yes, but there were other seats further down near the family court annex. I didn't see a name on it, sir. I'm just finishing my homework before—" "I don't care what you're doing," Quentin cut her off, his voice rising. He wanted to assert dominance. It was his warm-up for court. "This area is usually reserved for attorneys and their clients. Serious business, not for whatever this is. Loitering." Lila frowned, closing her chemistry book slowly. "I'm not loitering. I'm waiting for someone." "Likely story," Quentin scoffed. He looked at Nolan, seeking validation. You see this, Nolan? This is what happens when security gets lax. They let the riffraff clutter up the hallways, probably waiting for a public defender to plead down a shoplifting charge, aren't you? The hallway went quiet. A few people, a woman in a pantsuit, an elderly man with a cane, stopped to watch. Lila stood up. She was tall for her age, but she still had to look up to meet Quentin's eyes. Her demeanor shifted. The confusion vanished, replaced by a steely calm that was unusual for a teenager. "Sir," Lila said, her voice steady, "you don't know me. I suggest you lower your voice and find another place to sit. There's a bench open over there by the water fountain." Quentin laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. You suggest I go sit by the leaking water fountain? Do you have any idea who I am?" "No," Lila said simply, "and I don't really care." Quentin's face flushed red. He wasn't used to defiance, certainly not from a teenager in a hoodie. He took a step forward, his finger jabbing toward her chest. "I am Quentin Vale. I own this hallway. I own that courtroom, and I can have you removed from this building faster than you can spell incarcerated. Now take your little chemistry book and your attitude and get out of my sight. Go wait in the lobby with the rest of the delinquents." Nolan, the paralegal, looked terrified. "Mr. Vale, please. Judge Crow is going to call the docket soon. We should just—" "Quiet, Nolan," Quentin roared, not taking his eyes off Lila. "I am teaching this young lady a lesson about respect and social hierarchy, something her parents clearly failed to do." Lila's jaw tightened, her hand drifting to the pocket of her hoodie, clutching her phone. "Leave my parents out of this?" "Or what?" Quentin challenged, leaning in so close she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with his sour breath. "You'll tag me in a post? You'll cry? Move now." He reached out and shoved her textbook. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to knock it off her lap. The heavy book hit the floor with a loud thud, and her papers scattered across the dirty tiles. "Oops," Quentin smirked. "Clumsy." The sound of the book hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot in the tense hallway. Lila didn't scramble to pick it up. She didn't cry. She stared at the scattered notes, months of AP chemistry work, and then looked back at Quentin. Her eyes were dark, burning with a quiet intensity that unsettled Nolan, even if Quentin was too arrogant to notice. "You shouldn't have done that," Lila said softly. "I'm doing you a favor," Quentin replied, adjusting his cufflinks. "Teaching you that the world doesn't care about your homework. It cares about power, and you, little girl, have none." He kicked one of her papers aside with his shoe. It left a muddy streak across a diagram of a molecular structure. "Mr. Vale," the voice came from the courtroom door. It was the bailiff, Officer Derek Langford. He was a burly man with a thick mustache who had worked the circuit court for 20 years. He looked tired. "Judge Crow is taking the bench in 5 minutes. He's asking for all counsel on the Thorn case to be present immediately." Quentin shot Lila one last smug look. "Saved by the bell. Consider this a warning. If I come out of that courtroom and you are still here, I will personally call the sheriff and have you arrested for harassment. Do you understand me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He signaled Nolan, stepped over Lila's chemistry book as if it were trash, and strode into courtroom 402 feeling energized. He loved crushing people. It gave him the adrenaline he needed to win. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. The wood-paneled walls, the high ceiling, the seal of the state hanging behind the judge's chair. It was Quentin's arena. He walked to the defense table, placing his briefcase down with a confident thud. His client, Grayson Thorne, was already there. Grayson was 22, wearing a suit that was too shiny and looking bored. "About time, Quentin," Grayson drawled. "My dad is blowing up my phone. Says if this isn't dismissed by noon, he's pulling your retainer." "Tell your father to relax, Grayson," Quentin whispered, opening his file. "Officer Reynolds messed up the paperwork on the breathalyzer calibration. I'm going to tear him apart on the stand. You'll be driving that Porsche by dinner." "All rise." Bailiff Langford's voice boomed. Judge Harlan Crow entered. He was a stern man known for his no-nonsense attitude and his hatred of lawyers who wasted his time. He sat down, his black robes billowing, and adjusted his glasses. "Good morning," Judge Crow said, his voice gravelly. "We are here for the suppression hearing in State versus Thorne. Mr. Vale, are you ready to proceed?" "Ready as always, Your Honor," Quentin said, flashing his winning smile. "And the State?" The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Mira Lang, stood up. "Ready, Your Honor. However, we have a slight delay. Our key witness, the technician who calibrated the machines, is stuck in security downstairs." Quentin chuckled, shaking his head theatrically. "Typical, Your Honor. The State can't even manage the elevators, yet they want to manage my client's freedom. I move to dismiss based on failure to prosecute." "Denied," Judge Crow said instantly. "We will wait 10 minutes. But Mr. Vale, I heard a commotion in the hallway earlier. I hope you weren't the cause of it." Quentin feigned innocence, placing a hand on his chest. "Me? Absolutely not, Your Honor. Just a minor disagreement with a transient individual who was blocking the entrance. I handled it with the utmost professionalism." The judge grunted, looking skeptical. The double doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. Quentin turned, expecting to see the tardy technician. He was ready to roll his eyes and make a snide comment, but it wasn't a technician. First, the bailiff at the door straightened up, snapping to attention almost instinctively. Then, 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies walked in, looking serious. They stepped aside, holding the doors wide open. A woman walked in. She was in her late 30s, radiating an aura of absolute authority that sucked the oxygen out of the room. She wore a tactical vest over a dark navy windbreaker. On the back, in bold yellow letters, was the word police. On the front, hanging from a chain around her neck, was a gold star badge that Quentin recognized immediately. U.S. Marshal. She had dark skin, piercing eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her combat boots thudded heavily on the carpeted aisle. But what made Quentin's blood turn to ice water wasn't the badge. It wasn't the gun on her hip. It was the girl walking next to her, Lila Washington. Lila had picked up her chemistry book. She was holding it against her chest. She wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking directly at Quentin Vale. And for the first time, Quentin noticed the family resemblance, the same eyes, the same set of the jaw. The marshal didn't stop at the gallery rail. She walked right through the gate, past the prosecutor, and stood directly in the center of the courtroom well, facing the judge. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" Judge Crow asked. Though his tone was respectful, he knew a federal marshal didn't barge into a courtroom for no reason. The woman didn't look at the judge yet. She turned slowly, pivoting on her heel until she was facing the defense table. She locked eyes with Quentin. "I apologize for the interruption, Judge Crow," the woman said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a dangerous edge, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "I am Deputy U.S. Marshal Kendra Washington. I am here on urgent federal business involving a fugitive investigation." She paused, letting the silence stretch. And Kendra continued, her eyes drilling into Quentin. "I was just informed that an individual in this hallway assaulted my daughter, destroyed her school property, and threatened her with false imprisonment." Quentin felt his throat close up. His hands resting on the table began to tremble. "Assault!" Quentin squeaked. I never touched her." "You shoved her," Lila said. Her voice was clear in the silent courtroom. "You shoved my book. You kicked my notes, and you threatened to have me arrested for sitting on a bench." Kendra Washington took a step toward the defense table. She was 5'10" of federal muscle and fury. "Is this true, counselor?" "She was in the way. I didn't know who she was," Quentin stammered. He looked to the judge for help. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. She can't just barge in here and accuse me of—" "Mr. Vale," Judge Crow said, his voice dropping an octave. "Did you, or did you not, create the disturbance I heard in the hallway?" "I asked her to move," Quentin cried, sweating now. "She was loitering." "She was waiting for me," Kendra said coldly. "I was in the clerk's office filing a federal detainer on a suspect. I told her to sit on the bench and do her homework. I told her she would be safe here. Kendra leaned over the defense table, her hands flat on the wood. Was I wrong, Mr. Vale? Is my daughter not safe from grown men throwing tantrums in the Hall of Justice? Quentin looked around. The court reporter had stopped typing, her mouth open. The prosecutor was hiding a smile. Even his own client, the entitled Grayson Thorne, was scooting his chair away from him. It was a misunderstanding, Quentin whispered, his arrogance draining away like water from a cracked bucket. I apologize. I didn't know she was a marshal's daughter. That, Kendra said, standing up straight, is exactly the problem. You only treat people with respect if you think they have the power to hurt you. Well, Mr. Vale, she reached into her tactical vest pocket and pulled out a folded document. I have some bad news for you. I'm not just here to yell at you for bullying a child. I'm here because your name came up in the investigation I was filing downstairs. Quentin's heart stopped. What? Kendra unfolded the paper. It wasn't a detainer for a prisoner, it was a warrant. Quentin J. Vale, Kendra announced, her voice booming off the walls. You are under arrest. The silence in courtroom 402 was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that usually precedes a natural disaster. Quentin Vale stood frozen, his hand halfway to his tie. The words, "You are under arrest," bounced around his skull, refusing to settle. He was Quentin Vale. He was the one who arranged arrests. He was the one who golfed with the district attorney on Sundays. He didn't get arrested. Is this a joke? Quentin forced a laugh, though it sounded more like a dry cough. He looked at Judge Crow, his eyes wide and desperate. Your Honor, this is clearly a stunt. A retaliation because of the incident in the hallway. This is abuse of power. I'll have your badge for this, Marshal. Kendra Washington didn't blink. She walked calmly around the defense table, her boots thudding rhythmically. She didn't look like a mother anymore. She looked like a predator who had finally cornered its prey. Judge Crow, Kendra addressed the bench, ignoring Quentin's sputtering. I am executing a federal warrant issued this morning by the Northern District of Illinois. Charges include racketeering, witness tampering, and 3 counts of bribery involving a federal official. The color drained from Quentin's face so fast he looked like a wax figure. Racketeering, he whispered. The FBI has been watching your firm for months, Mr. Vale, Kendra said, her voice loud enough for the back row to hear. Specifically, they've been tracking the payments you made to silence witnesses in the Moretti trial last year. We had the indictment sealed. We were waiting for the right moment to pick you up. She stopped right in front of him, close enough that he could see the stitching on her tactical vest. I was actually on my way to your office to serve this, Kendra said, a cold smile touching her lips. But when I came to check on my daughter, imagine my surprise when I found the target of my investigation screaming at her in a hallway. Quentin looked at Lila. The girl was still standing by the gate, clutching her chemistry book. She wasn't smiling. She just watched him with that terrifyingly calm gaze. It was a look of pure, unadulterated judgment. Turn around, Kendra commanded. I refuse, Quentin snapped, his arrogance flaring up one last time, a dying ember. You cannot arrest me in the middle of a hearing. I am representing a client. This violates his Sixth Amendment rights. Judge Crow slammed his gavel down. Bang. Mr. Vale, the judge boomed, his patience evaporated. You are an officer of the court, and right now you are disgracing it. The U.S. Marshals have jurisdiction here. If there is a federal warrant, my court is adjourned. Deputy, assist the marshal. Bailiff Langford, the man Quentin had ignored for years, stepped forward with a grim satisfaction. He grabbed Quentin's arm. It wasn't a gentle grip. Turn around, counselor, Langford growled. Quentin tried to pull away, but Kendra was faster. With a practiced motion, she grabbed his left wrist, twisted it behind his back, and shoved him forward against the defense table. Ow! You're breaking my arm! Quentin shrieked. Stop resisting, Kendra said calmly. She pulled her handcuffs from her belt. The metallic rasp of the ratchets echoed in the room. Click, click. The steel cuffs bit into Quentin's wrists. They were tight, much tighter than the ones his clients usually complained about. He felt the cold metal against his skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of the courtroom. Quentin J. Vale. Kendra recited the Miranda rights from memory, her voice steady and professional. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As she spoke, Quentin looked up. He saw the gallery. People were holding up their phones. They were filming. The shark of Cook County, the untouchable lawyer, was being handcuffed like a common criminal, pressed against the table where he usually spun his lies. He looked at his client, Grayson Thorne. Grayson stood up slowly. The rich kid looked at Quentin with a mixture of disgust and self-preservation. He picked up his own file from the table. I don't think so, Quentin, Grayson said, his voice loud. My dad told me to hire the best. He didn't say anything about hiring a felon. Grayson turned to the judge. Your Honor, I am firing my counsel effective immediately. I would like to request a continuance to find a lawyer who isn't currently in handcuffs. Granted, Judge Crow said, not even looking at Quentin. Mr. Thorne, you are free to go for today. No, Quentin shouted as Kendra hauled him upright. Grayson, don't walk away. I can fix this. You can't even fix your own situation, man, Grayson sneered, walking past him toward the exit. Kendra spun Quentin around to face the exit. Let's go, Vale. You have a new appointment. As they began the long walk down the center aisle, Quentin felt every pair of eyes on him. The court reporter, the other attorneys waiting for their cases, the random citizens. But the worst part was the gate. Lila Washington was standing there, holding the gate open for her mother. As Quentin was marched past her, smelling of fear and sweat, Lila spoke. She didn't whisper. She spoke in her normal, clear voice. You were right about one thing, Lila said. Quentin stumbled, forced to stop for a second by Kendra's grip. He looked at the teenager he had bullied less than 20 minutes ago. What? He rasped. Social hierarchy, Lila said. It is real, but you forgot the most important rule. And what is that? Quentin spat. Karma doesn't care about your suit, Lila said. Kendra tugged on his arm hard. Move. They dragged him out of the courtroom, through the double doors, and into the very hallway where he had been the king just moments before. But now, he wasn't the king. He was the prisoner. And the girl with the chemistry book was watching him go, the U.S. Marshal badge on her mother's chest gleaming like a shield. The elevator ride down to the basement was silent. Quentin stood in the corner of the steel box, his hands cuffed behind his back, staring at the floor numbers as they ticked down. The air in the basement was different. It smelled of industrial cleaner, unwashed bodies, and despair. It was cold. They walked him through the booking area. Quentin had been here 1,000 times before, but always on the other side of the glass. He usually breezed through, flashing his bar card, joking with the sergeants, handing out business cards. Today, the sergeant behind the desk, a grizzled man named Officer Ruiz, looked up over his spectacles. Well, well, Ruiz said, chewing on a toothpick. If it isn't Mr. Vale here to bail out a drug dealer. He is the drug dealer today, Ruiz, Kendra said, pushing Quentin toward the counter. Or close enough. Process him. Federal hold. No bail until the arraignment hearing tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Quentin gasped. You can't keep me here overnight. I have a gala tonight. I have a life. Empty your pockets, Ruiz said, sliding a plastic tray across the counter. Kendra unlocked one handcuff so Quentin could comply. With trembling hands, Quentin removed his possessions. His Rolex Submariner watch, his gold money clip, his iPhone, his Mont Blanc fountain pen. Each item made a hollow clack as it hit the plastic tray. It felt like he was stripping away pieces of his soul. My shoes? Quentin asked, horrified. Laces out or take them off, Ruiz said boredly. Can't have you hanging yourself with those expensive Italian laces. Quentin kicked off his shoes. He stood in his silk socks on the cold, dirty concrete floor. He felt small. He felt naked. Fingerprints, Kendra ordered. They pressed his manicured fingers onto the glass scanner. The machine beeped, capturing his identity, reducing him to a set of loops and whirls in a database. Then came the mugshot. Quentin tried to compose his face, tried to look dignified. But the flash was blinding, and he knew. He just knew. that this photo would be on the front page of the Chicago Tribune by evening. "Cell 4, Ruiz said, handing Kendra a key. "Not general population," Quentin begged, panic rising in his chest. "You can't put me in Gen Pop. I've put half the people in this city in jail. They'll kill me." "You should have thought about that before you started bribing jurors," Kendra said unsympathetically. "But don't worry, federal holds are separate. You get a private suite." She marched him down a long corridor lined with bars. Hands reached out from the darkness. Voices jeered. "Hey, is that Vale? Yo, lawyer man, you get me out yet? Look at him. He's wearing the bracelets." Laughter erupted. It was a cruel, cacophonous sound. The men he had promised to help, the men he had overcharged and underrepresented, were now his audience. Kendra stopped at cell 4. It was a small concrete box with a metal toilet and a thin mattress on a slab. She opened the door. "In." Quentin stepped inside. The door clanged shut behind him. The sound of the lock engaging was final. He turned around, gripping the bars. "Marshal Washington, please. Can I at least make my phone call?" Kendra stood on the other side, her arms crossed. She looked at him, really looked at him, for a long moment. "You'll get your call when the processing is done. Usually takes about 4 hours. 4 hours? We're short-staffed," Kendra shrugged. "Budget cuts. You know how it is. Maybe if there weren't so many high-priced lawyers helping criminals hide their assets, the system would work better." She turned to leave, but stopped. "By the way," she said, her voice softening, but not with kindness, with warning. "My daughter Lila, she wants to be a lawyer. She's studying AP chemistry because she wants to understand forensics. But her goal is law school. She wants to be a prosecutor. She wants to put bad guys away." Quentin blinked. "What?" "She was sitting there this morning, nervous about her grades, thinking about her future. And you came along and tried to make her feel small. You tried to make her feel like she didn't belong in your building." Quentin looked down at his silk socks, now stained with floor dust. "You told her she was a delinquent," Kendra continued. "You judged her by her hoodie and her skin color. You didn't see her brilliance. You didn't see her potential. You just saw someone you could step on." "I apologized," Quentin whispered weakly. "No." Kendra shook her head. "You apologized because I had a badge. If I had been a housekeeper or a nurse or just a regular mom, you would have laughed in my face. That's why you're in here, Vale. Not just because you broke the law, but because you forgot that every person you step on has a story. And sometimes that story includes a mother who hunts fugitives for a living." She tapped the bars with her knuckles. Clang, clang. "Enjoy the accommodations, Mr. Vale. I hear the bologna sandwiches are terrible." Kendra turned and walked away, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Quentin Vale slid down the wall until he hit the floor. He pulled his knees to his chest. The silence of the cell was worse than the noise of the courtroom. He was alone. His suit was wrinkled. His career was over. And all because he couldn't just walk past a girl studying chemistry. He put his head in his hands, and for the first time in 20 years, Quentin Vale began to cry. But the nightmare wasn't over. Not even close. Because Quentin didn't know that the witness tampering charge was just the tip of the iceberg. The feds had more, and they were bringing in a special prosecutor to handle his case. Someone Quentin knew. Someone who hated him even more than Kendra Washington did. Time in a federal holding cell does not move linearly. It drags, it stumbles, and it suffocates. Quentin Vale had been sitting on the thin, grimy mattress for hours. His stomach rumbled, a painful reminder that he had missed his lunch reservation at Le Bernardin. He was thirsty. His throat felt like it was coated in sandpaper. But mostly, he was terrified. Every time the heavy steel door at the end of the corridor clanged open, Quentin jumped, hoping it was his lawyer. He had used his one phone call to dial the private line of Silas Holt, the senior partner at his firm. Silas was his mentor, his ally, the man who had taught him that morality was just an obstacle to billing hours. Silas hadn't picked up. Quentin had left a frantic, blubbering voicemail. Finally, footsteps approached his cell, but they weren't the hurried, confident steps of a high-priced defense attorney. They were slow, deliberate, and heavy. "Vale," a guard grunted, unlocking the cell door. "Interview room. Your counsel is here." Quentin scrambled up, relief washing over him. "Thank God. Is it Holt? Did he bring the checkbook?" The guard didn't answer. He cuffed Quentin again, hands in front this time, a small mercy, and led him down a different hallway to a small, windowless room with a metal table and 3 chairs. Quentin rushed inside, ready to demand answers. "Silas, you have to get me out of—" He froze. The man sitting at the table was not Silas Holt. He was a younger man, perhaps 35, with sharp features, dark hair, and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He wore a suit that was off the rack, cheap but pressed meticulously. On the table in front of him sat a thick accordion file. Quentin recognized him. The memory hit him like a physical blow. "Ronan," Quentin breathed. Ronan Hale looked up. He didn't smile. His eyes were cold, hard flint. "Hello, Quentin. It's been a while. 5 years, isn't it?" Quentin sank into the chair opposite him. "What are you doing here? Where is my lawyer?" "I am the special prosecutor appointed by the Department of Justice," Ronan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Because of the conflict of interest involving the local DA's office, since you've bribed half of them, the feds called me in. I work for the Public Integrity Section in D.C. now." Quentin felt sick. 5 years ago, Ronan Hale had been a rising star in the public defender's office. He was brilliant, ethical, and stood in Quentin's way on a high-profile murder case. Quentin had destroyed him. He hadn't just beaten him in court. Quentin had planted rumors about Ronan having a substance abuse problem. He had leaked false stories to the press. He had gotten Ronan disbarred for a year and ruined his reputation. Ronan had to leave Chicago in disgrace. "You can't prosecute me," Quentin stammered. "You have a bias. I'll file a motion for recusal." "File whatever you want," Ronan said, opening the file. "But you might want to see what I have first." Ronan slid a photograph across the table. It was a picture of Quentin handing a thick envelope to a juror in a parking garage. Quentin stared at it, the blood draining from his face. This is fake, AI generated." "It was taken by a private investigator hired by your wife," Ronan said. Quentin's head snapped up. "Veronica? No, Veronica loves me. We're a power couple." "Veronica filed for divorce at 2 a.m., Ronan said, checking his watch. "About 3 hours after your arrest. She also provided the FBI with the passwords to your private server, the one in the basement of your Lake Forest mansion, the one where you keep the spreadsheets of your bribes." Quentin couldn't breathe. The room seemed to be spinning. "Why? Why would she do that?" "Because she found out about your mistress, the 20-year-old paralegal," Ronan said dryly, "and because she wants to keep the house. Immunity deals are a powerful motivator. Quentin, Veronica gave us everything. The bribery, the witness intimidation, the money laundering through the Cayman Islands shell company. She gave us it all." Quentin slumped forward, his forehead touching the cold metal table. His empire wasn't just cracking. It had already collapsed, and he hadn't even heard the sound. "This is impossible," Quentin whispered. Silas will fix this. He knows people." Ronan laughed. It was a harsh sound. He reached into the file and pulled out a signed affidavit. "Silas Holt?" Ronan asked. "Silas Holt is the one who called the U.S. Marshals this morning to confirm your location at the courthouse. He cut a deal yesterday. He's turning state's evidence against you to save the firm. He claims you were the mastermind, Quentin. He says he was just an unwitting dupe." "That liar!" Quentin screamed, slamming his cuffed hands on the table. "He taught me everything. He organized the payoffs." "I know," Ronan said calmly. "But he talked first. In the federal system, the first rat gets the cheese. You get the trap." Ronan leaned forward. "You are looking at 20 years, Quentin. Minimum federal prison. No country club, no golf, just concrete and bad decisions." Quentin looked at Ronan, seeing the satisfaction in the man's eyes. This was the karma Lila had talked about, It wasn't just the arrest. It was the total dismantling of his life by the people he thought he owned. "What do you want?" Quentin croaked. "I want you to plead guilty," Ronan said, "to everything. Save the taxpayers the cost of a trial. In exchange, I won't recommend the maximum. That's the best I can do. And if I fight, then I will put your wife on the stand," Ronan said. "I will put Silas Holt on the stand, and I will put Lila Washington on the stand. And I will let the jury see exactly what kind of man bullies a teenager and cheats on his wife." Ronan closed the file and stood up. "Think about it. You have until the arraignment tomorrow morning. Oh, and Quentin." Ronan paused at the door. "That girl you yelled at? Lila? I saw her in the lobby. She's studying the chemistry of accelerants. She's brilliant. She reminds me of myself before you tried to ruin me. You picked the wrong fight, Quentin. You picked a fight with the future." The door slammed shut. Quentin was left alone with the photograph of his crime and the knowledge that his wife and his partner had sold him out. The next morning, the shark of Cook County didn't look like a shark. He looked like a bottom feeder. Quentin had not slept. His expensive suit was wrinkled and smelled of the holding cell. His blonde hair, usually gelled to perfection, was greasy and matted. Stubble darkened his jaw. He felt grimy inside and out. They didn't let him shower. They simply cuffed him and marched him into the van for transport to the federal courthouse. When the van pulled up to the loading dock, Quentin expected a quiet entry. Instead, he heard the roar. It sounded like a stadium. "Cover your head," the marshal said, opening the back doors. As Quentin stepped out, the flashes blinded him. Hundreds of cameras, news crews from CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and every local station. But it wasn't just the press. There were protesters, people holding signs. "Justice for the victims. Eat the rich. Karma is a marshal." Someone had leaked the video. Quentin stumbled as the marshals hustled him toward the door. "What? What is that? Security footage?" the marshal grunted, pushing him forward. "From the courthouse hallway yesterday, someone leaked it to TikTok. It has 40 million views, Vale. You're famous." Quentin's stomach dropped. The hallway. Him yelling at Lila. Him kicking her papers. The world had seen it. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a viral villain. The Karen of the legal world. Inside the courtroom, it was standing room only. The air conditioning was struggling to keep up with the body heat. Quentin was led to the defense table. He sat down, instinctively reaching for a water pitcher that wasn't there. Next to him sat a frantic, sweating man in an ill-fitting brown suit. "Who are you?" Quentin asked. "I'm Gary," the man squeaked. "Public defender. I was assigned your case 10 minutes ago. Everyone else had a conflict of interest." A public defender. Quentin Vale, who charged $800 an hour, was being represented by a man named Gary, who looked like he was about to faint. "All rise." Judge Helen Carter entered. She was known as the Hammer. Quentin had once made a sexist joke about her at a bar association dinner. She looked at him now, and he knew she remembered. "Case number 24-CR-8922, United States versus Quentin Vale," the clerk announced. "We are here for arraignment and bail." "How does the defendant plead?" Judge Carter asked. "Not guilty," Quentin hissed at Gary. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Gary squeaked. "Very well. Regarding bail?" Ronan Hale stood up for the prosecution. He looked crisp, professional, and deadly. "Your Honor, the government requests that bail be denied. Mr. Vale is a flight risk. He has offshore accounts in the Caymans containing millions of dollars, accounts we are currently in the process of freezing, but the funds are substantial. Furthermore, he has significant connections abroad and is facing a sentence that essentially amounts to life in prison. He has every reason to run." "Objection!" Quentin shouted, standing up. "I am a pillar of this community." "Sit down, Mr. Vale," Judge Carter snapped. "You speak through your counsel." "Your Honor," Gary stammered, "Mr. Vale has surrendered his passport." "He has 3 passports," Ronan countered smoothly. 1 U.S., 1 St. Kitts, and 1 under an alias. We found them in his safe." The courtroom gasped. Quentin slumped back. He had forgotten about the fake passport. Bail is denied. Judge Carter ruled instantly. The defendant will be remanded to the custody of the U.S. Marshals pending trial. The gavel banged. It sounded like a coffin lid slamming shut. As the marshals moved in to take him away, Quentin looked back at the gallery. He was looking for someone to save him. He saw his wife, Veronica. She was sitting in the front row, wearing large sunglasses and a black dress, looking like a grieving widow. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her phone, typing. She didn't even glance up as he was hauled to his feet. Then he saw them in the back row near the exit. Kendra Washington, still in her uniform, and Lila. Lila was wearing her school uniform today, a plaid skirt and a navy blazer. She looked like exactly what she was, a student, a child. Quentin locked eyes with her. He wanted to scream. He wanted to blame her. If you had just moved, if you hadn't been there. But as he looked at her, he saw something that broke him completely. Lila wasn't gloating. She wasn't filming him. She wasn't laughing like the people in the comments section of the viral video. She looked sad. It was a look of pity. She was looking at him not as a monster, but as a pathetic small man who had destroyed himself for nothing. As Quentin was dragged toward the side door, Lila raised her hand slightly, a small wave. "Bye," she mouthed. It was the ultimate dismissal. She was going back to school. She was going to finish her chemistry homework. She was going to have a life, and he was going to a cage. The doors swung open, and the noise of the hallway hit him. "Mr. Vale, Mr. Vale, is it true you tried to bribe a judge? Mr. Vale, how do you feel about your wife filing for divorce? Mr. Vale, look at the camera." Quentin lowered his head. The cameras flashed, capturing his shame for eternity. He realized then that the hardest karma wasn't the prison sentence. The hardest karma was that he had spent his whole life trying to be a somebody. He had crushed people to build a name, and now everyone knew his name, but they spoke it with disgust. He had become the one thing he hated most in the world, a loser. 3 months later, the snow was falling in Chicago, coating the ledges of the federal courthouse where Quentin Vale's life was officially coming to an end. There were no cameras this time. The viral fame had faded, as it always does, replaced by the next internet villain. The courtroom for the sentencing hearing was half empty. Veronica wasn't there. She was already living in their Aspen condo with her new boyfriend, a 25-year-old ski instructor. Grayson Thorne wasn't there. His daddy's new lawyers had gotten his DUI pled down to a parking violation. Silas Holt was there, sitting in the back row, looking pale and shrunken. He had taken a plea deal, 2 years in minimum security in exchange for bearing his former protege. Quentin sat at the defense table wearing an orange jumpsuit that chafed his neck. He had pleaded guilty on all counts. There was no fight left in him after the bail hearing. The evidence Ronan Hale and Veronica had provided was insurmountable. Special Prosecutor Ronan Hale stood up to address Judge Carter regarding sentencing. "Your Honor," Ronan began, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "The defense has asked for leniency based on Mr. Vale's previous service to the legal community. The government argues that this service was merely a mask for greed and corruption of the highest order." Ronan paused, walking over to the table where Quentin sat hunched over. But there is one final detail the court should be aware of, a piece of irony that proves just how deserved this sentence is. "We often talk about karma in the abstract," Ronan said, looking toward the gallery where Marshal Kendra Washington sat, stoic as ever. "But in this case, we can pinpoint the exact minute karma arrived." Ronan picked up a remote and clicked a button. A large monitor showing security footage flickered to life. It was the hallway video. Quentin yelling, Lila sitting quietly. "We all saw this," Ronan said. "We saw arrogance, but the FBI saw something else. We saw a timeline." He paused the video. At the moment Quentin kicked Lila's chemistry papers, the timestamp read 8:52 a.m. At 8:50 a.m. that morning, Ronan explained, Marshal Washington was downstairs. She was filing a federal detainer on a low-level drug trafficker named Rico Davis. Davis was being held by local police on a minor charge. Marshal Washington needed him secure because she suspected he had information on a larger target. Ronan looked down at Quentin. "That target was you, Quentin." Quentin frowned, confused. "I don't know any Rico Davis." "No, you don't," Ronan agreed. "But your client, Grayson Thorne, did. Rico was Grayson's dealer. He supplied the drugs Grayson was high on when he was arrested. You knew Grayson was high, but you buried that fact to ensure an easy DUI acquittal instead of a felony drug charge." Ronan clicked the remote again. The video showed Quentin still ranting at Lila. Timestamp 8:58 a.m. "Rico Davis was terrified of prison," Ronan continued. "At exactly 8:55 a.m., while you were busy explaining social hierarchy to a teenager, Rico Davis cracked in the holding cell downstairs. He told the intake officer he wanted to cut a deal. He said his lawyer, your associate paid by you under the table, told him to take the fall for Grayson Thorne." The courtroom went deathly silent. "Marshal Washington got the call at 9:01 a.m., Ronan said. "The call confirming that Rico Davis had implicated you directly in witness tampering and suborning perjury on a current case. That was the final piece of probable cause she needed to execute the sealed warrant she already had in her vest." Ronan leaned in close to Quentin. "If you had just walked past her, Quentin, if you had just gotten your coffee and gone into the courtroom at 8:45 like a professional, you would have been inside Judge Crow's chambers before the call came through. You might have had another day, maybe another week, to hide assets or run." Ronan pointed at the screen at the frozen image of Quentin's sneering face. "But you couldn't do it. You had to stop. You had to bully a child to make yourself feel big. You spent 13 minutes in that hallway feeding your ego, and those 13 minutes bought the FBI the time they needed to end you." Ronan turned back to the judge. "His arrogance wasn't just a character flaw, Your Honor. It was the literal architect of his destruction. The government requests the maximum sentence of 25 years. Quentin stared at the monitor. He felt like he was going to throw up. It wasn't Veronica snitching. It wasn't Silas turning rat. It was his own pettiness. He had traded 20 years of his life for the momentary satisfaction of yelling at a girl in a hoodie. Judge Carter didn't waste time. "Quentin Vale, you used the law as a weapon for personal gain. You disgraced your profession. I sentence you to 240 months, 20 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Marshals." As the cuffs clicked onto Quentin's wrists for the last time in a long time, he looked toward the back of the room. Kendra Washington was standing up to leave, and next to her was Lila. Lila wasn't looking at Quentin. She was looking at Ronan Hale. As they passed the bar, Lila stopped and shook Ronan's hand. "Thank you, Mr. Hale," Lila said clearly, "for the internship offer. I'm looking forward to starting this summer." "We're lucky to have you, Lila." Ronan smiled genuinely. "We need more prosecutors who understand that justice is about truth, not power." Lila put her headphones back on, the same big ones from that day, and walked out of the courtroom next to her mother, stepping into her future. Quentin Vale was led out a side door toward a transport van that would take him to a federal penitentiary in Terre Haute. He was nobody now, just another inmate number. And he knew with a sickening certainty that would haunt his small concrete cell for the next 2 decades that the girl with the chemistry book had been right all along. Karma didn't care about his suit. Quentin Vale believed his wealth and status were invincible shields. He operated under the delusion that power meant the ability to crush others without consequence. He never imagined that his undoing wouldn't come from a master rival or a complex sting operation, but from a random Tuesday morning where he decided to belittle a 16-year-old girl. His story is a brutal reminder that character is revealed in how we treat those we think can do nothing for us. Quentin's fatal mistake wasn't the bribery or the fraud. It was the blind arrogance that made him believe he was untouchable. In the end, the shark of Cook County wasn't taken down by a bigger fish. He drowned in the shallow waters of his own ego, proving that sometimes the hardest justice is the kind you bring upon yourself. If seeing that level of arrogance get instantly shut down gave you chills, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. What do you think? Did Quentin deserve 20 years or was karma too harsh? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you want more stories where justice is served ice cold, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who you're talking to.